for number one, and we've given our sort of answer. What is it specifically, additionally, that you
Sorry, could you speak up?
Yeah, so for number one, what is it specifically, additionally, that you're looking for us to address?
And certainly anybody else can jump in here. For me, there has been a very clear question from the community as far as if this project fits within the character of the area. And I personally don't feel that that's truly been addressed, at least to a satisfaction of the community. There's still a lot of questions that continue to come, or concerns that continue to come up with that. So for me, the response for number one would really be putting some thought in responding in how you see what you're proposing fits within the character of the area. Specifically related to the 250 some RVs that are going to be on gravel, concrete, water, septic, hookups, electric, as well as the lagoon-style pool with the 35-foot structure right off of 97.
I'm not trying to be difficult or argumentative with you at all. I just really want to make sure that we get you what it is you're looking for. So, you know,
let me. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If we're still on number one, I just want to give it. There's anybody else that has opportunity to, if they have any other input. No. Okay.
Let's move on to some others. I just had a couple questions. So, the aquatic center will be maintained in earth tone colors. We're fine with earth tone colors. I spoke to them about that.
Can you get the microphone so I can hear?
Is this okay if I sort of face this way? With number one, you asked if we could agree to earth tones, which we can. So that's not a problem. Does that answer number four? And
it's a couple times throughout the
number 57.
There's times throughout that where a response is stated more than one time. So obviously it would be through each time that it comes up.
Yeah, so you have, like in 57, it says clarify impacts of aquatic center, but that's really going back to number 4. Is that fair to say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect.
And number 1.
Right. On number 6, the Narcan piece, I've looked into this. I've talked to the county. There is a program, but I can't find a legal justification that allows us to provide it. So we're still looking for that, but we're committed to doing it as long as it's legal.
So with Narcan, it certainly is legal to be able to have it available and to have staff trained and accessible for anybody to use. This was, as stated here, a statement because I think it's one of those things that's a best practices. Without getting too far into it, because this is my job of what I do, people use drugs. Fentanyl and other synthetic opiates are mixed into marijuana and every other drug, and that's what really has been causing the overdoses and deaths. When you're in any environment, you could be at PECs or anywhere, you never know when it's going to happen, and literally the response time of waiting however many minutes for an ambulance or somebody to show up with Narcan versus having it on the site to be able to administer Narcan is can be literally the matter of life and death. So I don't know why anybody, any business, wouldn't want to have Narcan available, which, by the way, the state provides for free. They have vending machines for free. They're happy to come install it. They will refill it with a telephone call. They will do all of that for free. To me, it's just one of those things that is a best practices that just could save a life. And why wouldn't anybody want to do that is my point of view with that.
Again, so I wanted to tell you that we were looking into it seriously, and what we found was the county has a program through the Department of Health. Yep. And as long as our legal review comes back that we can participate in that, and we will. Is that going to satisfy what you're looking for, Chairman?
So again, this was a statement.
I got you.
Ultimately, it's It's not our purview to say you have to do it. It's just one of those things that I would hope that you would do, and you are legally able to. I can tell you, you're legally able to have it available and have staff trained and to make it there.
Jeff, if I can just quickly step in here, right? So putting this in the context of SECRA and DEIS, one of the jobs of the planning board is to look at impacts to emergency services. Certainly, if you have an operation that 20 people are showing up, there's a possibility of overdoses or whatnot, and one way to address that is just to have trained staff on hand with Narcan. And Jeff's correct that the planning board is not going to force you to do this, but certainly if you agree to do this, if you believe you legally can, it addresses the question of impacts to emergency services. That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure. And you should know there are many staff members who are CPR qualified. I just wanted to let you know that. That's not something that we've overlooked. Number 10, I take this as more of a comment than something you need us to respond to.
That's correct. Anything that's in italicized, non-bold is
okay. That's helpful.
It's not a response to
24. Obviously, we intend to maintain our landscape. I don't know that we can dictate what somebody else beyond us does, but we could talk about a condition that changes in landscape have to be approved, right? Can we move that from a response to a later on in the process issue?
If it's something you can initially, are open to, I would say put it into the DEIS as a potential condition that you agree to.
I'm sure you can appreciate this, Mr. Afzali. It's the successors and assigns part that I can't necessarily guarantee to you. But certainly we want to maintain the landscape, and we have no issue with that.
I mean, we're certainly there's certainly the other comments that, or other parts of it too that will also address successions or potentials of down the road selling or closing to do it. So we certainly can put that as included as part of that as well.
Okay.
The successor piece of it.
Okay.
However, while you own it, your organization and company owns it though, and certainly can address that part of it.
Absolutely. That's not so.
And just for you, Jeff, they don't necessarily have to agree to it and find successors and assigns. If you make it a condition of the permit, any owner would have to make sure that it's maintained, regardless of whether or not they agree.
On number 26, I see it starts with NPS and then it says 26. So my understanding is we did a pretty comprehensive water study about this, and one of the conclusions of that study was that it would be nearly impossible for us to drain down the water supply given how low we are on the water table and close to the river. So I just don't understand what it is that we're looking for on number 26 that hasn't already been provided.
So if I can, Carly, you're here from NPS, if I can put you on the spot, or if you're not comfortable in addressing it now. Whenever it says either the part that says NPS, it means that was their comment or their question. So sure. Rather than trying to speak for.
I didn't entirely hear your question. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Turn your head at
Oh, sorry. So we did on number 26. You're asking about you're concerned about groundwater impacts from the increase from 6,300 to 2,980, and there's a couple of things that we've already clarified. Number one is that 29,000 number is based on the minimum per unit number that the Department of Health requires us to use for any campsite. It's 100 gallons per day. It's not a realistic number. It would be difficult to use 100 gallons per day at most of those campsites. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that we did a detailed water study that showed that based on where the project is so close to the river and so low on the water table, it would be very difficult for us to run out of water there. So I'm trying to figure out what it is your concern is.
I think the concern is less running out of water, but the impact of the septic system on the water itself, like
the quality of
the water quality, yeah.
And so,
and is that at all impacted by, particularly, is that at all impacted by inundation from floodwater, or if there's because a lot of this is in the floodplain. So if that water table is being inundated by more water and your septic system is draining into it, is that an impact at all?
So I think the answer to that is currently you have very old septic systems serving a greater number of people than we're talking about having at the camp. And we're talking about adding modern systems which will do a much better job at handling the water. We're also adding stormwater runoff that isn't there currently. So we have a whole SWIP. There isn't one there at all at the moment. So I think some of this is addressed, and I just want to make sure you get what you're looking for. Maybe it's even a conversation that we can have tomorrow or something like that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So on number 28, our data that we have, that we possess for emergency service would be incident reports. We have about 4 of those a year for the last few years that we've been operating. Happy to provide those to you as long as we have to redact personal information.
Sure.
But we don't have EMS data. It's not something that we possess. I think it's something you guys might actually have better access to. Is it all right if we provide you what we have?
With what you have, yeah.
That's fine?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Number 46, we'll address. Number 61 was a suggestion that was made by the town supervisor, and it related to providing some support towards a sewer study.
Not the understanding. I believe. Oh God, no, I forget his name. It's your turn, Alex.
Alex.
Is going to have a conversation with the town supervisor, so they will.
We'll address that.
They will
Okay.
address it and let us know the results or conversation about that.
Yeah, but I would say definitely if there's a contemplated amount, it's important to put it into the DIS because it goes towards the positive impacts of your project, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll let them have that conversation, and we'll provide
Whatever the result
whatever
is
comes from that.
what they come up with. Yeah.
On number 85, and I know this is you again, I know you may not like what we responded with, but I literally don't have much more that I can add. I mean, there's probably 25 pages of response to that particular question right now.
Okay.
So we can talk about that too, but
Okay.
I think it's one thing not to like the response, it's another that we haven't provided a full response.
It's all in the appendices.
Yeah.
Everything's all in there.
There's 3 letters that were attached that go into great detail about what our position is on that issue.
The last page is from UDC, and Terry's not here today to.
We can get with Terry on that. 87, though, I want to talk about this. I guess this goes back to the MPS again. So I know over the course of the project we've provided animations, photos, drone footage. We did a boat trip. The reality is when you're on the river looking up at the camp, the elevation is so high that you don't really see the camp. So is there a specific area that you're concerned about that we can focus on for you?
Yeah, so there's components south of 97, for example, the parking area, that are going to be visible from the river. I think that the focus in the report has been on the camping area north of 97, and it's sort of not acknowledging the part between the river and 97. But also, and this is sort of just a clarification, that our original comment was in response to language in the DEIS stating that areas north of 97 wouldn't be substantially obscured by natural vegetation. And as you're saying, if the visual studies have said that that's not going to be visible, then maybe
maybe Karen.
That it's not visible and therefore landscaping wouldn't be necessary.
Hi, Carly. I'm Karen Labruto from Lavelle Associates. So from the river, right, the area that is proposed for parking, which is currently used for parking, but will be graded and basically graded, and whatever vegetation is there, which is not much, but there is some, would be cleared to provide for a large expanse of grass parking. And again, they've used this area historically for parking. They'll continue to use it in the future, and this just makes it a little bit more accessible. The tree line that is between the existing park models on the site today, approved back in 2020, that tree line remains. There's no change to that. And the vegetative area at the parking area is not right, it doesn't necessarily obscure, well, it doesn't obscure the parking area from the river currently. So I guess
The parking area is not being expanded at all?
I mean, it's not a gravel or asphalt parking area in that area. It's grass parking. So, I mean, it will be changed in that it's graded now, and where there are small stands of brush, what have you. I mean, Rocco, you could actually tell us what's in that area, in that grass parking area, if you don't mind, in terms of trees. You probably know it pretty well.
Yeah, sure. Rocco Baldessari, General Manager at Kittatinny. So that grass area, it is shrubbery around the perimeter of it. In the middle, it is strictly grass currently.
And the shrubberies remaining?
I mean, the shrubbery around the perimeter, yes.
Okay.
I mean, we have...
The native vegetation, the current native vegetation will stay the same.
I mean, we use aerial imagery to approximate tree clearing in that area, because it's the site is over 200 acres, right? So in order to delineate tree clearing, you'd have to have those trees all surveyed. I mean, that's like just an insane survey, right? And so we approximate those areas that would be cleared by way of visual imagery. But you could probably go to the site today and see what he's attesting to. I also think you should talk about your canoe operations, because again, we're not changing the canoe livery aspect of the site, and I don't know what you currently use in terms of that area. If you were to plant, if it was proposed that we were to plant trees to obscure that grass parking area, how it would affect your river operations.
With the current vegetation, some of it, I mean, approximately goes from 5 feet to 15 feet of trees and shrubbery that you visually, when you're in the water, and when you see from our drone footage, you cannot see that parking area. You may see the top of a vehicle, that would probably be it. But we currently use it as a staging area. So we have as much as 200 rafts inflated, plus another 50 canoes, kayaks, tubes, our trailers, our vehicles for moving equipment is all stationed there. So that has been visual there from the river for 40 plus years. And that will strictly stay the same. That part of the operation does not change.
I think it would be helpful to have some of that clarification in...
Sure. Yeah. Sounds
So
good.
we'll work with you on making sure we get what you're looking for. Drilling versus blasting. My recollection of this is that we were asked not to blast, so we changed what we were doing to do the drilling. So seems like a pretty significant ask for something that we were asked not to do in the first place. I'm just wondering if we can get around this together as a group.
So this is came from the UDC. So again, since Carrie's not available, that's a conversation that you want to reach out to her to get specifically from her perspective of what she was looking for. I know when we met in the workshop, it wasn't so much. It was just more of the questions like, how do you know that it's blasphemy? Was it that the town asked you, or community members asked you not to blast, but in relationship to drilling versus blasting, there were just questions around like what drilling might take a lot longer and what have. So again, it was just, I think Carrie can help clarify the question a little bit more to...
Yeah, I think all they were looking for is a comparative analysis between the impacts of blasting and impacts of drilling.
Right. In the sense of, I'm sorry.
Right, yeah, I was going to say, and I understand that you guys were, you said no blasting because of comments here. And if that's your plan and you're not going to blast, you can argue, well, we're not blasting, we shouldn't have to do this thing. But, if it's not a big lift, just put a comparative analysis.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'm not sure that it's not a big lift. I mean, a comparative analysis would involve additional noise analysis of the implications of the ripping, which is what we're talking about here.
I'm sorry, another way though, is that how did you come to the determination that it's drilling over blasting?
So the way we came to it is by way of discussions with the construction management group in terms of how they were actually going to construct the project. Because in order to determine phasing and all sorts of things that feed into, you know, what this project is about and how we explain it in the EIS as far as construction schedules, we didn't know how it was going to be constructed. And so for the utility line that is in the area that's within rock, they're using a trenching machine, which is typical for utility construction. And so that trenching machine will essentially operate as something that's ripping the rock out. In other areas, they will be using an excavator, which they would have been using anyway at that time, and they're excavating, right? And it just happens to be that in that spot, it's not dirt, it's rock. So that's how we came to it, that it's very rippable rock. And we say that actually in the report. I mean, I'm not trying to, but it's in there, that it's the type of rock. It's in the geotechnical information. It's the type of rock that falls apart easily. And so it's just not necessary to blast it.
And then the other thing is that when we were with on the Bald Eagles, was it DOH or DEC? The Bald Eagles, that study is based on not blasting as well. So
yes,
that was another issue. So
we
basically we got to that position by working with you, with the DEC, and construction management. And maybe the answer is, rather than a comparative analysis, which would be a rather large lift, that if we find that we have to blast, we come back to set conditions around it that work for everybody.
So again, I would have this conversation with Carrie, and that might satisfy it, or she can just say, well, if you just word it this way or that way, essentially it would satisfy it for in the EIS.
So just generally speaking, if when working with Carly or Carrie, we come to a solution that works for them, that will satisfy what you're looking for with respect to what's in this letter?
Yeah, so specifically, as we asked National Park Service and UDC to be part of the workshop and to give their input, and subsequently have given their input and identified which was their input specific, versus what's planning board input versus Keystone, etc., like that. So try to identify it so you know where it's coming from,
right,
with that viewpoint. So being that it was driven by, in this case, it was driven by UDC, having that conversation with Carrie, and again, I think she can say, well, this is what I'm looking for, if you can adjust it this way, etc., and it checks her box, and it's going to check our box because it came from...
Yeah, ultimately the comments that are made by those organizations have been adopted by the planning board, so obviously at the end of the day it has to satisfy you, because there's that working relationship, right? If they're happy, the planning board will be happy.
Yeah. Well, I think so generally what I'm understanding is you've done a good job of identifying who was asking these questions, and if we work with those individuals on responding and come to a consensus, that will likely satisfy the board.
I think that's a pretty good statement.
The one question we have has to do with the invasive species, and maybe...
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so she had a question about the emerald ash borer and some sort of hemlock invasive species. And as we understood it from the scope, that was not a task of ours to do invasive species analyses. So we have no data to that effect. I can tell you that there is, as part of the habitat analysis that was done, it was documented that there is hemlock in the floodplain forest, which is a significant natural area observed by the DEC up in the northern part of the site, coinciding with the Beaver Brook, and that we have no disturbance at all in that area. But as to invasive species and their presence on the site, we have no information. That would have to be another analysis that would be done. Our understanding was that that was not part of the scope.
It seems pretty clear to us
Well,
from this document that it isn't.
Yeah, the reason I say that is because from Ken's analysis, and I don't want to speak for you, Ken, but just running through the various subject headings, he addressed invasive species. He said, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but his last sentence says, we recommend that the scoping document is sufficient as is and should not be changed. He talked about regulated species. The project's undergone consultation with DEC to determine the requirements for the impact review, and the methodology was determined by DEC. We recommend that the scoping document is sufficient as is and should not be changed.
Those are on page 8 and 9 of the final scoping document. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, it's in his memo on page 4 and
We'll
page
take it up with
9.
Carrie as well, and point those things out, but I just wanted that to be drawn to your attention as well. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, the last one. She also requested tree inventory. For the same reason I just mentioned to Carly, is to do a tree inventory, you actually have to have the surveyors go and survey the trees. This is a 235 acre site. We've surveyed a number of trees as part of our analysis and consultation with the New York State DEC as it related to bald eagles. That was, white plains and other trees over a certain diameter and rest height. So we had done a significant amount of work to that end, but again, that was not something we understood to be part of the approved scope. And I think that, again, in the analysis or memo from Ken, he talks about tree clearing, and he says tree removal. The information is provided in sections 2B and 3C and H. We recommend the scoping document sufficient as is and should not be changed. And as it relates to larger habitat and species analyses, a discussion and analysis of impacts to non-regulated species and habitat should not be considered because the area of disturbance is generally within areas already disturbed. We recommend that the scoping document is sufficient as is and should not be changed.
Do we know why she wanted to do a tree inventory? We don't, do we?
She did say it in the workshop. I think I can remember what exactly she said.
The tree removal was for safety purposes for the roads and making them wide enough to traverse across. That's where most of the tree clearing was.
Utilities as
And
well.
utilities, right. Septic systems in particular had those areas there. So the initial thought was to get the project to where we wanted it to be both environmentally and safety-wise, trees had to be removed. But the rest of the trees on the site are being maintained. So the thought was, being such a large, vast area with so many trees on it, a tree inventory is exhaustive. It's huge. And then being that they're not coming down, or not intended to come down, the inventory would have no value. I think that's what the conclusion we have come to. So I think we probably just need to talk to Carrie again and find out what her concern is and see if we can phrase it in a different manner to get her satisfied.
Mr. Sharon, if I may, I believe there's several different issues here. I don't want to speak for Kerry, but there was a discussion back and forth about the landscaping versus the natural canopy. Mm-hmm. And they, of course, discussed the emerald ash borers and the Adelgids. They both attack hemlock trees and ash trees. So I don't know what can be done about it. That's what we discussed. But I think their concern was, how is it going to look from the river if the natural canopy goes? But I don't know what anybody can do about that. I think that's part of the confusion with this issue, is that.
I know that in addition to that, I think I want to say the same thing you did, that it wasn't just about talking about what the plan for the landscaping will be, but it's also maintaining the landscaping that is
Natural.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm sure, I won't speak totally for Kituteni, but I'm sure that they do manage the natural area to some extent. And we can get a little bit more information about that and look into what best practices there are for managing forests according to those invasive species and that sort of thing. And just, we'll look into it more. But that's very helpful, thank you. I don't think we understood the character of the question, so thank you.
And the last thing I wanted to talk about is there seems to be some confusion about the different accommodation types and which ones have hookups and which don't. Is that fair to say?
Well, I mean, I think it was outlined in your response in the environmental impact study.
So I thought it might just be good to just talk through this so you guys, so if we're writing it in a way that's confusing, we can get past that. The question was, why are safari tents considered RVs, treetop cabins considered RVs? Those aren't. That may have just been poorly worded in our response. If you look at the response to number 1, the reason that we included descriptions of those in there was to highlight that not all of the accommodations are actually RVs. And so those treetop cabins fall within part of that answer that's saying the non-RV portion of the project includes the following.
Okay.
Does that make a little more sense to you?
I definitely, for me and other people would think there is a little bit of confusion in throwing that all in together and mixing up the RVs and non-RVs, etc. So I can.
The reason we did it was because there's that number 25, 210, and there was a confusion, I think, that all of those were RV accommodations, and so we wanted to make sure it was clear that that's not the case. That only 1,710. There's only 1,700 roughly RV accommodations on the site, and the rest are non-RV accommodations. There's a photo that has pictures of each type of accommodation, and maybe what we could do is add the detail about the hookups for each one for those, and whether it's being called an RV or not RV.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think part of where this confusion is coming from, right, is treetop cabins and safari tents, and where they're considered RVs. There's a portion of the town code that says any campground that offers cabins or similar structures as sleeping quarters shall be considered a recreational vehicle campground for purposes of the section. Right? So it's not saying it's a recreational vehicle; it's just part of that. So I think some of that confusion is just there.
Yeah, that's right. 190.25.
Yeah.
Sub B something.
They shouldn't put campground in there.
So, but I think that photo, if we add that detail to that photo, I think that would help. Anything else? Any other confusion we can clear up?
Well, I mean, we put the comments here, so as you go through it, of course, if you have any questions or unsure of something that we could try and clarify for you, then by all means, please let us know. We're certainly available to do that. And just, I'm going to ask, maybe talk just about the response.
Right. So you guys are obviously put together a written response, responding to this, identifying where in the DIS the answers are, or if you need to readjust the DIS, point out where that is. You'll submit it whenever you submit it. Obviously the sooner the better. But for purposes of the secret clock, which is we've got 30 days from the time that it's received, the board's going to deem your submission received at the planning board meeting following whenever you submit it. So, for example, if you submit it 2 weeks from now, it'll be deemed received at the next planning board meeting, so that they have the 30 days to review it.
We understand what you're saying. We'll act accordingly. I do just, and I hate to keep harping back to this, but character and consistency, I don't understand how else we can add to our explanation, because basically our answer is that this is an existing RV campground and we're adding upgraded accommodations. And I know that some folks don't like that explanation, but what I need to do in order to give you what you're looking for is understand what specifically we can address in addition that might answer some questions, because I'm just sort of, I don't know how to give you what you want.
Well, just first and foremost, not what I want. It's trying to have the community, or certainly members of the community, have a better understanding of the impact that what you're proposing to do has on the land. With the mindset of, I'm not going to speak for everybody in the community, that's what a public hearing will be for, and they will certainly share their views with you at that time when we have it. But what has come up is that we're a very rural area, that while you call it an RV campground, it is has been historically mostly a tent campground that recently, in the last couple of years, has 13 RVs in it, as opposed to now 252 proposed that will have hookups to water, septic, sewer, electric. So I think your clarification, your statement of it's an RV campground is existing, and we don't, what you want, it's not. You have been a tent campground, and you've gotten, a couple of years ago, 13 RVs, I don't know, it might have been give or take, but 13 RVs that you were allowed to park by the river, and so you're calling that an RV campground, but now that you're adding 200 and whatever the number is of RVs and such, with all of those hookups, it can be led to believe that it substantially changes the character and the nature of that campground, and subsequently, what is the impact on the character and nature? It changes to an area that has prided itself on being very eco-friendly, very rural, very rustic, and understanding that. So if that doesn't help clarify it, anybody please jump in. You will get, I imagine, a lot more clarification at the public hearing, where people are able to comment their concerns or their questions that they have.
And I think in talking about this, I understand what you're saying, which is that you don't agree with our answer. And I think that may be a separate issue from whether we've given you a complete answer. And I just don't want to get hung up over something that will get addressed in public comment and will be talked about down the road, in terms of us just rewriting the same thing in a different way. I think we have a difference of opinion, right? And we would also point out that there were something like 58 RVs plus the 13 that were on there that have been on that site. And there's not 252 RVs. 42 of those are these little bivvy tents, which are on wheels, but they're little cabins for 2 people with no water or bathrooms or anything like that.
Okay.
I can make more clarifications there, but at the end of the day, I just feel like we're at loggerheads over a difference of opinion rather than a completeness issue, and I don't want that to stop us from going forward to getting public comment.
So in the response, and on our response, where we asked the question of how do you feel it fits within the character of the land, so you didn't put a response specific to that. Okay. Of how it fits within the character of the land. I'm giving you a heads up that based upon what I've read and heard and comments, etc., this is going to be a huge response or a huge comment from the public hearing, which for me as a planning board member, others jump in, are going to take very seriously and listen to what they have to say. You're getting a heads up that this is going to come up. So having a well thought out response of how you see what you're proposing fits into the town of Highland, and looking at what the town of Highland is historically and currently, and painting a picture or coming up with your mindset of how you see that it's the perfect fit for the town of Highland, I think will only serve you in whenever the public hearing opens up. It will serve you, because whether you address it now, you're going to be addressing it in the public hearing and afterwards. So Heads up.
I appreciate that. So we'll attempt to expand it. We'll specifically discuss land. I think at the end of the day, we will give you our best answer.
Sure.
And rather than making this a completeness issue, let's make this one for comment and discussion.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think a prime example would be promoting the aquatic center as fitting in being earth tones versus,
Sure.
fluorescent colors. The design of your welcome center being built architecturally rustic. So the rustic aspect is what you should probably emphasize, and maybe with your RVs or whatever, your cabin or your trails, whatever you're doing there, I think you need to emphasize the rustic. That's how it's going to fit in.
That's great.
Thank you. It's good to hear just some other thoughts on the subject.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, right, it's this board's job, based on the information it has in the EIS, to determine whether or not the proposed project fits within the character of the area, neighborhood, or whatnot. So this is the opportunity for the applicant to provide you with that language, right? It's not going to be an issue that hangs up whether or not the EIS is complete, right? It just provides them the opportunity to answer that beforehand and to kind of help you answer that. So I think that's, what Jeff said is well stated.
The last thing that came up in your discussion, I think you raised it, was about the day passes. And you said our answer was disappointing, and I just wanted to know what was disappointing so we can maybe address it. Number 19, I think it was.
Yeah, general public can't use it.
Oh, absolutely, they can. So
Only, in your statement, if you don't have enough campers there.
Okay, so this is where I think it's just a language issue. We have maximum number of people that can be in the pool area by DOH regulation. And we also have represented to you all that there would be a maximum occupancy for the camp. So what we were saying there was, if we're not full, we'll sell day passes, and that's all. So it is open to anybody, but we're not going to exceed our lawful occupancy limits by having more people come than we can service safely. So I hope that was understood.
So
Because that will come up.
But can I just add something? That we also can't anticipate the number of general public people that would come in order to rewrite a traffic analysis to account for that, because that's not part of our project, our business plan. Outright, our business plan is the improvement of our campground. So, our traffic analysis is reflective of that. If suddenly we start allowing people above and beyond the occupancy that we're set for and that we've expressed to you all is what we plan for, then that changes the whole scope of any traffic impact analysis that we've done. So, we would have to have more information to be able to...
reframing it a different way, and I think it goes back, I think what Dave was getting to too. It's how do you present to the community of the benefits to the community, as opposed to being this big bad company that's going to come in and turn the town upside down. What can you offer that's positive to the community members? So a family that would like to use a pool, on a Saturday, and that knowing that, hey, you're in my backyard, the whole point being is whatever you can do, you can do. I'm not telling you that you have to expand your numbers or whatever that is, but it's coming from throughout the document, it's coming from the perspective of what is our selling point to the community and what we are offering the community. How are we going to be good neighbors, and how are we going to be good neighbors?
Good neighbors, yeah.
So
And as opposed to anything else.
I'm going to go through personally and point out some of the great things that we've done, but I would hope also that, Rocco's been running that camp now for how many years? 4 years. And I know that they've done a lot of great things. The river cleanup every year. They've donated how many suits to the local fire department?
Over 250 drivers. 250 dry suits to local dive teams from Matamoros all the way up to Narrowsburg. We provide complimentary campsites and training for the National Community Safety Patrol every year. We provide complimentary access from all of our private property for National Community Safety. Also for National Park Service uses a lot of our accesses for access to the river. Like he said, we've been doing a river cleanup since for over 33 years now. And we've gotten, I think the number is over 300 tons of trash out of the river. And that goes from up here in Berryville all the way down to Digman's Ferry and below. So there's things we do every year between our team here. We've been here for 4 years. We have a great campground. We have a lot of guests who come to campground. A lot of people who do work for us. They do come to the town of Eldred High School. And everybody I speak with is my dad worked here, my grandfather worked here. So it's traditions and there's history here, kids, and that's going to stay. That's what I want to say with that community. So you have a strong connection with each and everybody who lives in this area, and we like to provide whatever we can to support the area, but just whatever, where we started, it will continue on, and it has continued the last 4 years since, Northgate has owned the property, and myself have been there as a general manager.
I just wanted to make the point that the big bad company that everybody's afraid of is here and has been here for 4 years as part of the community, and I hope that counts for something. And we'll make sure that it's more apparent in this document.
It was great what he just said.
Right?
So
He's great.
make sure you sell yourself.
I'm just going to let Rocco.
Come
on, Rocco.
You got to get that information. You got to get that information out there because I don't think that people put it together that you've been running it for 4 years. That a lot of I kind of what I pick up is like you want to come in and you want to do all this stuff, not realizing that you've been doing it for 4 years, that you own the business already. And so that's part of getting the information out there so that people have a better understanding or a better understanding of, in fact, we've been here. This is what we're doing. This is what we are wanting to do. This is why we feel it's a good fit for the town of Highland. And put that out there and then let the community give you their thoughts.
We can do that.
Last year at one of our last meetings, your last thing you said was that you had 20,000 campers and 40,000 day trips on the river. That needs to go out. Nobody knew any of that. Mm-hmm. Any of that information.
And that's been for 4 years that we've been managing that and managing it well. And like I said earlier, we had 4 EMS calls a year. I mean,
So that's the information.
I'm going to make it better for you. And I'm going to do
for
that.
All of us. For us.
Yeah. Have Rocco do a promotional
Just
video.
run it through Rocco first.
You got it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, so much for all your hard work.
So just to kind of put this all into the deeper context for everybody, right? So the immediate step right now is to determine whether or not the DEI is adequate for a public review. So we'll make that determination. I understand you're going to do a public hearing. You're going to get public hearing comments. Those comments will then be addressed by the applicant through the FEIS, the Final Environmental Impact Statement. But at the end of the day, the whole reason why we're doing this process is your job is going to be to adopt a finding statement, or a secret finding statement. This is before you make a decision on the application. That finding statement, what you're supposed to be doing is you're looking at the environmental, social, and economic impacts of the project. But you're not just looking at the negatives, you're also looking at the positives. So you're balancing, right? So the information that's going to be in the DEIS and the FEIS, it's got to have that, what are the positive environmental, social, and economic impacts? Because that's what you're using to counterbalance any negative impacts that you find. So that's why this is necessary.
Gotcha. Said it great. Okay.
There you go.
So with that, do we make a motion that we're, as far as the decision for the DEIS that was submitted to us, that we're not accepting it, that we're giving a response, or?
So they've submitted a DEIS, you've provided adequacy comments. They've given us responses, and now we have another set of comments. So at this point, it's getting narrower and narrower, right? There's much less comments this time around. Hopefully, their responses or revisions to the DEIS will satisfy everything you've done here. When they've given us those responses or revisions to the DEIS, the 30-day clock starts, but it's going to start at the next planning board meeting. And at that point, if those issues are addressed and the DEIS is adequate, you'll make a motion, you'll find it final, and then open up the written public comment period, which is required, and then if you so choose, hold a public hearing on the EIS.
So for tonight's purposes, we can simply say that we've responded,
Yes.
that we've provided our responses to their latest
Yep.
EIS, and
Yeah, they have an unlimited time to respond.
Right.
We have 30 days once they get their response.
gotcha. Questions around that? Other comments?
And you're going to clarify everything with Kerry
And Carla,
and PS.
Thanksgiving meeting, do you guys know what your plan? I think that's gonna put us, if we get it in by, October, that would be the November meeting. Are you guys gonna actually hold that the night
We
before?
changed the date on that. I mean, do you have the, we can get you the date, November and December's, I believe.